Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a great honour to be here as part of today's important conversation. I've been asked to talk about whether Australia's accounting standards and regulatory environment help us to engage with our regional trading partners, and also whether Australian professionals are ready or considered regional ready in terms of living and working productively in the regional economies around us. All of us are increasingly working in a global, borderless world, where traditional barriers have been swept aside. Sound, transparent and comparable financial information is crucial to supporting our global financial system and businesses, many of which now have extensive operations across the world. As more and more countries and companies realise they need to become globally competitive, this will become even more important. In terms of accounting standards, both Australia and our regional trading partners share the goal of moving towards a common global standard in financial reporting. Australia and New Zealand were quick to sign up to the use of the global reporting language of the International Accounting Standards Board, the International Financial Reporting Standards, or IFRS. Today, the listed companies of both countries use accounting standards that are identical to the IFRS. Apart from New Zealand, Australia's major regional trading partners are at different stages on their journey to the use of IFRS. China has adopted accounting standards that substantially cover the IFRS, while the Republic of Korea has already adopted IFRS for all of its listed companies. The situation in Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan is very similar. However, when you turn to Indonesia, India and Thailand, they have yet to consider the adoption of IFRS. Japan, one of our other major regional trading partners, while it has not fully adopted IFRS, it does allow for voluntary application of the IFRS for consolidated financial statements by companies that can meet certain criteria. Virtually all Japanese listed companies are eligible to apply IFRS. Today, countries around the world that use the IFRS make up about 52% of the world's GDP. The next step is to have the IFRS being applied consistently within and between our jurisdictions. Without this, the usefulness of financial reporting will be severely diminished. The importance of having a regulatory environment that is in tune with the global developments cannot be understated, and I think Australia is doing quite well in this regard. We are seen to be policy leaders, with many Asian countries following within our footsteps. Going forward, however, it is important the laws that establish regulators and the leadership of those charged with leading regulators do so in a way that does not introduce new or unnecessary barriers to global activity. In some ways, Australian professionals considered regional ready. As an economy that is the leader or an early adopter of many new regulations such as IFRS, Australian professionals have been well placed to assist businesses within the region to manage the introduction of new regulations when those countries seek to adopt what Australia has already put in place. Australian professionals have long been recognised for their high levels of education attainment, professionalism and experience, making many of them well suited for senior roles within the region. This advantage, however, is likely to dissipate over time, as the nations of the region making significant investment in the quality of their education institutions and their professional organisations, and as locals gain greater international exposure to complex business and regulatory issues. For example, countries such as Singapore and China are currently investing heavily in their own domestic educational institutions and recognition of their professional communities. There are currently around 150,000 Australians working across Asia. This number is growing and represents a 50% increase in the number of Australians working in the region over 10 years ago. CPA Australia, by way of example, has 150,000 members across the globe. Almost 1/4 of our members reside and work within Asia. Indeed, this has been a key selling point for the CPA Australia designation, and it continues to be globally recognised and respected. While Australian professionals have enjoyed a significant leadership position in Australia, the reality is that our complacency and lack of appreciation for just how much the axis of economic power is shifting to Asia could well be our biggest barrier to further integration. The importance of this integration led us to release a landmark study, Australia's Competitiveness from Lucky Country to Competitive Country, last year. This research has a powerful message for all Australian business and political leaders, in particular the urgent need for Australia to engage in comprehensive economic reform to ensure that we are well positioned to maintain our leadership position within the Asia-Pacific region. Australia is now home to more than 2 million people born in Asia, and the fastest growing segment of our population is people with backgrounds in Asia. However, we cannot think that that alone is enough to foster cultural ties, particularly in the short term. In fact, if we are a nation to rely on this section of the community to drive our engagement with the region, we will never integrate with the region particularly. It is the collective responsibility of Australians to seek to build closer ties within the region, not just Australians of Asian heritage. Right now, even though the world's centre of economic gravity is clearly moving east, only a very small proportion of Australian students are studying an Asian language. According to the Asian Education Foundation of the University of Melbourne, only 18% of primary and secondary school students study Asian languages. And what's more, by the time they get to Year 12, only 6% of students continue to study an Asian language, with many of those students many of those students already being native speakers of that language. To emphasise this point, Kath Kirby, Executive Director of Asia Link and the Asia Education Foundation of the University of Melbourne, in an article in 2011 called The Conservation, stated only 300 students of non-Chinese backgrounds across Australia study Chinese in Year 12. And given the importance of our relationship with China, that's probably a stark reality. We think that Asian languages and cultures need to be emphasised much earlier at primary schools, and for our country to take a much more medium and long-term view as to how important our cultural and linguistic understanding of China and other Asian countries will be in years to come. When we think about it, a child born today will spend their entire working life with China as the world's largest economy. Our education system must help skill our future generations for this reality. If we go back to the question of are Australian professionals considered regional ready, I would have to say typically no. While the skills and the experience of Australian professionals is in high demand in the region at the moment, the significant improvements we are seeing in the quality of professionals in Asia, combined with the lack of suitable language skills of many Australian professionals working in the region, is likely to see the requirement for our professionals to fade. Australian professionals must be doing more to make themselves regional ready. As such, skills will become increasingly critical for their career. We are seeing many senior roles, especially of multinationals, moving from Australia to Hong Kong, Singapore or Shanghai. The government's commitment to the new Colombo Plan is a welcome and timely first step, but we are strongly of the view that the current pilot phases need to rapidly expand to places such as China and India for the reasons I've already covered. In the future, Australian professionals cannot assume that their career will be wholly in Australia. If we want to move into senior roles, they will need to be regional ready, as many of those roles will be Asian-based. At CPA Australia, we have been doing business in Asia for over 60 years. We know firsthand that mutual respect and an understanding of different Asian language and cultures is vital for increasing successful business relationships. Consider that by 2020, Asia is expected to have more middle-class consumers than the rest of the world combined, and that currently the number of top 50 ASX board members with Asian and Chinese experience is relatively low. This needs to change. The extent to which we benefit from the opportunities the Asia century presents will largely depend on our capacity to understand and engage with our neighbours in both the short and medium and longer term. Thank you.